we got three really difficult questions. We've got what is the command and control, authority and accountability, we've got the hybrid and the organizational future. The three questions, if we want to do this, is what do we want to keep of command and control and authority and accountability? We don't want to throw wheels out. We don't want to throw brakes out, period. There's something about human beings doing work that was actually very effective here. Most of the world was built through this system, right? That's why we have the standard of living that we currently have. We're in a hybrid state, so what do we throw out and what do we have to invent to get to here? So it's literally that process. What are the organizational design parameters that we want to keep that were command and control and authority and accountability? What do we want to throw out and say, no, we're not having that anymore? And what do we want to invent brand new? And we're going to go back, if we go back to the view of work, can we go back to that slide, views of work? This one. We're saying this was terrific for command and control and authority and accountability. 1, 2, 3 and a bit of 4. Senior management was up here. Most other employees were down in here. Most employees now aspire to be here, and so does management aspire to be here, because it's a hell of a lot more efficient, it's a hell of a lot more fun, basically, and we're educated enough to be up in here. So the CEO has got this awesome responsibility. The CEO's got to actually create a framework of understanding as to how to create an organization that looks like this, that doesn't look like that, right? And that's why we're in this hybrid state, because that's a very, very difficult move, and we don't have enough full concepts to do it. Now the CEO's basically got two major problems here. So if we flip forward, okay, here we are, is we live in a world of assumptions. So what we assume to be the way the world works is put into our institutional design and say KPIs or performance systems or whatever. That then creates behaviors which actually justify the assumptions. So let me take you through this, taking women as an example. We go to women in 1800 in almost any country in the world. Women are seen, the assumption is that women are not as capable as men. They're not physically as capable as men, and they're not mentally as capable as men. That's the underlying assumption about women. So what happens to institutional design? Men are sent to school, women are not schooled. Men do complex work, women do domestic work. So this assumption drives the institutional design. The institutional design then of its accord will drive experiences, outcomes and behaviors. So what you get is women become relatively poor problem solving and the capability of women is lower. We need to change that slide. Relatively poor problem solving capability of women is lower. And you then get self-justification of the assumption. I told you so. They're dumb. They're not very smart, right? They're not very smart because we created institutions that made them not very smart. Now, exactly the same thing is actually happening in our organizational design. So the assumptions that are existing in our minds about command and control and the need to control human beings in order to get them to work for you, that assumption is sitting there and it will create the institutional design that's fitting that assumption. That assumption will then create behaviors that justify the design. That's what will go on. So the CEO has got to dig himself out or herself out of assumptions. That is incredibly hard to do. Do you have a question or not, Josh? You're right.
Oh, I'm just thinking about KPIs in this sort of scenario, right? KPIs,
yeah, which I think you should be thinking
assume that unless I set these measurements and targets for you, you're not going to actually
absolutely.
do your best. Absolutely. What you actually get is people that will work to meet the KPI instead of working to do their best, which may be well beyond
absolutely
the target set. Right?
Yeah. When I was working in the States in a manufacturing plant, we had a form called the AC363, which had 32 lines on it, and we were measured on 32 lines, and line 32 was the summation of all the lines. We managed ourselves exactly to meeting what was required on line 32, and when we had operational planning reviews, we knew that finance and the controller was going to push us for about a 2 or 3% improvement. Before the meeting, I would actually work really hard. I'd be worried shitless and work really hard to see how I could make a 5% improvement. Then I would fight like crazy and say there was no improvements whatsoever. Then the controllers would say, no, Julian, damn you, you're going to do 2%. And I knew I could do 5, and I go back to California. That was the game. That's what we do with KPIs, right? So that's what's happening, which actually leads into that chart that you saw, the modes of work. If your chief executive is being measured on KPIs, you're not going to get the modes of work that are associated with the triad, because they're going to create institutional form. If you measure the CEO under a set of assumptions that I have to give him bonuses or her bonuses to do their best, then they're going to design an institution that's associated with those assumptions from the board, right? So then you'll get the behaviors that you actually have self-generated, and you'll justify that, well, this is how people need to be managed, right? Because they do this stuff, right? So, and right now, this I picked women purposefully, we're in the middle of a massive change about how women are being viewed and how women's capability is being viewed. So the women's movement is trying to change institutional design and has made huge steps in terms of things like schooling and beginning in work, so that the experiences and outcomes will actually reflect a new set of assumptions, like women are just as capable as men, basically, right? That's what we're doing right now with women. If we're going to change organizations to a new way of thinking about work, which is, if we flip back to the 1 through 7 slide,